congratulations. Can I just say, please put your hands together for Julian. He wants
Yeah. Well, the initial idea was a kind of a very simple document, and I quote unquote randomly met Tim Parish.
That's me.
That's him. Yeah, at a bar in Darwin. I was with Nick's son at the time, and I showed him what I've done, the edit that I did over the lockdown in the autumn of 2020, and he didn't like it. And
it's not exactly true. It was 10 hours.
Yeah,
you know, like it was not an edit. It was like a very, very rough cut.
Yeah, it was very rough. I was sort of a bit over it at that point. So basically, you know, it's a kind of tumultuous time in human history. I think this was July 2020, and over some time the project kind of snowballed, but you know, Tim really encouraged me to do the crowdfunding so we could get a lot of the animations done, and just one of the reasons it took so long, just paying for everything. Like, it's a super low budget project. I haven't done all the maths. It's only like $70,000 or something like that over 4 years, you know. So we're really working on a very limited budget, and a lot of the animation, you can see the love and attention to detail that's gone into that work. And I just want to mention Bo Dealey, who's in the audience here. I've been mentioning, you want to stand up, Mr. Dealey? Come on, show your face. So he, give him a round of applause. A lot of the still images you're seeing and a lot of the animations, the artistic animations that are really reflective of the deep state, come from Bo Dealey's work, and he's one of the most underrated psychedelic artists in the world today. I just want to thank him once again for, you know, really giving us an immense amount of material that really helped to depict not a cliched psychedelic space, but a space whereby there is an artistry and an awareness of depth and dimensionality that speaks of someone having a true experience of the mystical. So maybe you can have a little chat to the audience.
Sure, yeah. Well, my name is Tim Parish. I'm the editor of this film. I also made a film about 10 years ago with Witham called Eye Awakenings that we actually premiered at this cinema pretty much 10 years ago.
And I was here on stage talking at that premiere.
Yeah, that's right. Here we are. Everything goes in certain cycles. As Julian said, we met 2 years ago now and started working on this project intermittently over the couple of years, and we really worked deeply in trying to understand, work out the themes of how these stories could go. You know, the thing about filmmaking, Julian had created, I think, or recorded maybe 60 or 70 hours of interviews.
It's like 100
hours. Right, and by the time I got it, it was 10 hours. And then we whittled that down to now 2 hours. But there was also working with all these amazing animators and artists and visualizing it. As the editor, one of the challenges is also to visualize these deep journeys that everyone, Daniel and Tom and many, many other people have shared that are kind of like dreams, they're lucid, visionary states. Hopefully without being too repetitive or cliche, at the same time with a limited budget. And I think one of the things I'm really fascinated by is that visionary art really is this language. We have this visual language which all these incredible artists are already creating to visualize this, and then a bit like the stories that we're getting told by all these people, they are like maps, and then they allow us to sort of see into this world, perhaps through we can access through dream, through maybe the natural DMT in our brain, maybe through meditation, And then when we share these stories, such as what Julian has brought together, it makes them less alien to us. And I think that's a really powerful thing about a documentary like this, is that it kind of helps to expand our awareness of what is possible in the imaginal or the visionary state, the mystical experience, and then it grounds it into something that's really perhaps more tangible, and we can perhaps believe and transcend, into a greater state of general consciousness, thanks to these psychonauts who are willing to share their really interesting experiences.
Yeah,
Tom's work over here.
I just want to talk about the project in terms of the wider battle or war that we're facing in consciousness. Really, this project, for one thing, was a pushback against kind of cultural cringe and cultural low self-esteem, top poppy syndrome, whatever you call it. You just see how the people tell the stories. I'm just marvel at how lucid and clear they are. And I think your regular sort of man on the street are like, wait on here, they're actually extraordinarily lucid. They're not brain damaged people. They're actually got this human ability to articulate their story in an incredibly clear way. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it is really talking about the spiritual elements of the psychedelic experience, which in the kind of secular materialist paradigm is kind of thrown under the bus. So really wanted to highlight the aspect of psychedelics whereby people are connecting to divine consciousness. Like Greg Kasarick is saying in it, almost in a throwaway sense, like, what do you want to, what do you want to understand? What do you want the divine to make you aware of or bring awareness of in your life, And so that was a big part of it. Another part of it was to really discuss the entities. And initially, I wanted to have a sort of discussion or debate about the entities and explore that, but there wasn't anyone to debate it with, because there was pretty much only one guy, Torsten, who, his bit didn't make the cut, who really just completely disbelieved that entities were a thing. All the people I interviewed, they were either kind of sitting on the fence saying, oh, they don't really know, or like Nick Wallace says, like, hey, let's embrace the mystery, there's something strange going on. Or they're just like, yeah, I just had to come to terms with it, it's real, And this is a huge paradigm shift that we're experiencing in our culture. And, Australia is, because of the preponderance of DMT in Australia's national floral emblem. I was just spending time with a guy last night who's been extracting DMT from acacia picantha, the golden wattle, which is Australia's national floral emblem, And the preponderance of DMT especially has brought people to have these transcendent experiences where they're making contact with the numinous, with the other, with the divine consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And, just really wanted to document that, because I think we're living in this kind of we're living in this sort of godless age, and I think psychedelics are a way for people to realize that, hey, that's reality. And I think we really started, particularly talking with James Orrock. He nails it so quickly. Says, hey, look, I was like math and science, just pure rationalist, and now I'm like have a direct and intimate connection with the Godhead, So I think all this is very important, because it's ultimately not just about psychedelics. It's about bringing people back to have an awareness of who they are as spiritual beings. Again, like James Orrock is saying, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So it was kind of quite. He loved that when I filmed that, and it was so, striking that he died in, I think it was I think it was July 2020, in a paragliding accident in the desert. And he lifted off, very hot temperatures, and landed in the middle of the desert. And they took some weeks to find his body, But yeah, he died doing what he loved, and he was he was a pioneer. He's a little bit like Russell Crowe. He's sort of like, we accept him as Australian sort of thing. But yeah, it was really great to meet him, and I spent a couple of days with him up in the World Paragliding Championships up in Bright. But yeah, that's I'm gonna let Tom and Daniel have some words.
Okay, well, that was my first time seeing this documentary, and I was absolutely mind blown. The animation, whatever money that you spent on it, bloody well worth the wait.
Wasn't much.
I think one of the stories that stick out to my mind is the Amanita trip report. It was very well narrated, and the visuals complemented it really well. But yeah, man, I'm really impressed. And Julian came to me, I think, was it 2018?
Would have been, it was 2018. Would have been probably April 2018.
Yeah.
Tom, can I ask you a question? Because we haven't met until tonight, but it's a funny thing when you're working on someone's interviews that so long, you feel like you know them, and you have all these and I've got to know your work. So perhaps you could tell the people here about what you do in your YouTube show, because I think what you do is quite interesting and similar to what this documentary is about, but on a really different level. Can you talk about
So I started my YouTube channel around 2016 after a really profound ayahuasca experience. And I guess my intention for making this channel was because I was quite pissed, to be honest, about people kind of keeping their voices down, and there was this huge stigma around psychedelics. And I'm like, why isn't no one talking about this? And it just basically started from there, and I started making documentaries, traveling the world about culture, meeting different people. Julian was my very first podcast guest, which is pretty cool. And yeah, just been, learning, growing, making mistakes, but also just trying to develop my skills as a filmmaker. And obviously making videos on psychedelics on the YouTube space can rise a lot of problems. Even just recently I got a YouTube strike for one of our videos.
Not surprised.
Yeah. So it was a safety guide on how to identify psilocybin mushrooms, but helping people avoid poisonous mushrooms. And YouTube's you're promoting the creation of hard drugs. I'm like, what? We're going out in nature pointing out these mushrooms, and it's anyways, I don't even want to get into it.
A lot of your videos are sort of trip reports, so deep kind of long journeys of the Ayahuasca one that we grabbed a little bit of footage from there.
Yeah, so
how does that go legally on YouTube? If they have that problem?
Oh well, usually when you make it in a documentary context and you're doing it for education, and I guess making a disclaimer at the beginning helps. And for a long time, you don't usually have any problems. I mean, I've seen literally a documentary on Vice teaching people how to make cocaine in the Colombian jungle, which is literally the creation of hard drugs.
Yeah.
But anyways.
And then there's Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. It's a pretty big,
show. I think as long as you're not blatantly just promoting it, because some people's channel I've known over the years whose channels completely got deleted, but they're just literally just taking drugs every week. And you know what I mean?
And filming themselves.
Yeah, basically. Right. If you are going to do that, at least do it in a documentary, educational context. And
what's your thoughts in terms of this kind of doco and where the culture's at for raising awareness about the legalization or the medicalization of it?
I've seen a lot of progress over the years, and I think people are a lot more receptive to psychedelics, and especially the scientific research behind it. I think Melbourne, wasn't it the first city to fund research on psilocybin or something like that?
In Australia?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the palliative care, some years ago,
Yeah, so I think, and I've gone to kind of some group meetings about psychedelics and stuff, and then every year that I go, I haven't been in a while, but every year that I go, I see it growing and growing, and I see that psychedelics are becoming a little bit more mainstream. I'm seeing documentaries on Netflix and on YouTube channels and respected entrepreneurs and all these kind of guys, all these thought leaders are becoming more open and speaking about these things. So I definitely see that conversation growing in the public. So yeah, it's been pretty cool seeing the.
Yeah, fascinating. You must get a lot of feedback from your followers too, because a lot of you've got a lot of subscribers, right, on your YouTube channel.
Couple.
Very interesting show. Daniel, what about you? What about your? That was an amazing experience that you shared. It was really phenomenal to try to visualize it. I hope we did justice to your.
It's quite interesting. My main animator, my main gun animator said, "Look, I can't do this. It's beyond my pay grade. It's just I can't do it." So, Tim had to kind of visualize it as best he could. Yeah.
I am just so grateful that this has come out. Thank you very much, Julian. Thank you, Tim. And was it Bo? Exceptional work, especially the iboga vine with everything else coming out of it. Brilliant. I couldn't remember, when you contacted me a few weeks ago, I couldn't remember what I said because it was early 2018 and it was expected to come out in a couple of years' time. And we've known each other since about 2007, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to have come full circle from knowing you when Changa and things were very much new. I'd been using psychedelics for a very long time at that stage, but there wasn't much discussion at all. And as mentioned, I've been to prison in New South Wales for 23 grams of mushrooms in a 5-point-something gram bag. And that made me lose touch with psychedelics. It was very traumatizing being in a high security prison with murderers and all other sorts of things for psychedelics. I looked quite unwell still in 2018 because I was still recovering from that. But I am very glad that you used the part about entities. That I don't remember speaking about that, but that was very much what my experience was like, that entity contact experience. It was absolutely brilliantly done. Yeah, thank you so much.
That must be also in terms of the drug war, having been incarcerated for that, because there's Greg on the other side saying he couldn't even get arrested for carrying LSD or whatever, going to court. But on the flip side, a lot of people are actually getting persecuted for essentially experimenting with their own consciousness.
Yeah, there's not that many people, and like Greg, I've recently found out about a woman who's in her late 70s and has been walking into police stations in Western Victoria holding large amounts of MDMA, DMT, and they don't want to arrest her. Why do they not want to arrest her? Because she can articulate it, she's well known and loved in the community, and they don't want people like that. They don't want people like Greg. They don't want people like this woman in her late 70s that is going to bring all of the right attention on this. They want to throw away people in their late 20s and stuff like me, someone who's had the knowledge but was too anxious to speak about it. When I was in prison, you didn't, and for a couple of years after, you didn't hear about microdosing or anything really. Tiniest little bits here and there in the media. And from 2017 onwards, it has really grown massively. And another thing I like about this documentary series, it's like a good full spectrum extract. It doesn't just say the positives of these things, because there are a lot of scary and negative experiences, some that last far longer than the 4, 6, 8, 12, however many hours we're expecting these things to last for. Speaking about the importance of integration, set and setting, these things have been brought up many times. I've spoken about it with Tom and many other people. I've spoken about it on stage here for the Australian Psychedelic Society in 2017, but we rarely see and especially something this quality, people talking about those really difficult experiences. So thanks for that too.
Yeah,
that needs to be shared.
It was really hard to extract people talking. A lot of the sort of people in the psychedelic world, they didn't want to talk about the negatives. You know, Tom was one of the few people who did, and I actually had a limited amount of material because people consider psychedelics some sort of PR campaign. But it's like, if we're not being honest about people's internal experiences and the dark and crazy weird stuff that happens, especially in the higher doses, we're not being honest about the possible content of the psychedelics. So it's really dishonest and disingenuous. And I've talked to psychiatrists in Australia who say, yeah, we're trying to be like a Trojan horse, trying to get into the medical establishment, and then we'll jump out and show our true colours who we really are. It's like, it's really deceptive. It's like, come on, guys.
I think one of the things I was really interested in and pleased that we went down this road when I first got involved, it seemed an obvious choice to talk about medicalisation of psychedelics. Obviously, it's happening all over the world. This is, where a lot of the changes is, but Julian was very adamant that he didn't want to focus on that. And although there's a little bit of it in there, obviously, Julian wanted to focus on the real experiences of people outside of the medicalised model, which I think is really interesting because maybe you could explain a little bit more about it, obviously, but I think that, the way he explained it to me, and I agreed, it was that for so many of us, it's not about healing necessarily. There is definitely healing that happens, but for a young 20-year-old or 18-year-old who's just got huge curiosity about the nature of existence, that is not about healing. And to medicalise it and to only speak about it as medicine, even though it's amazing medicine for many, many people, cuts out a huge part of the visionary seeking that people have and the lessons that we learn from it. And I thought that was really unique because it's so different to where else the trajectory, I suppose, of the conversation is going.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people at the moment who, there's so much emphasis on the medicalisation, but there's so many of us who just want to see decriminalisation. We don't want to be persecuted. We want to be able to engage and do this in a way where there's not stigma foisted upon us, and it's in a way it's beyond healing. Healing's like the first layer. There's like another layer. It's like the layer that James Hart went into, which is like awakening into deeper layers and levels of consciousness and realizations of the potentials of consciousness. Like a big inspiration to me, and I think many people, is Kalinda Iyi, who was like really adamant that it's all about these, plus 20 gram mushroom experiences, where in that space you're being a true explorer and you're really finding out about the nature of reality, and you're, engaging with these extraordinary states. And, I think that's incredibly inspiring, that we have this attitude, because, I think that's why we call it evolutions, because, hey, ultimately we're about evolving human consciousness. We want to work against this transhuman agenda, which is trying to attach us to machines. We want to realize, hey, we are the technology. We have the power to awaken these higher potentials within ourselves. And I think that's something that people realize in the 60s, and now we're getting this, we're in this new phase and this wave. So, last few months I've really feeling like, wow, I feel like humanity is really on the cusp of so much. There's so many people waking up, and I feel like we're really getting it together on a really deeper level, and we can expect like great change in the next 10 years or so. I'm really feeling that. Maybe we want to get some people to ask some questions, or ask them if they want to ask some questions.
Is anyone out there got a question for anyone up here? No question.
Is this for us?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Julian, did you get much material on people taking different types of psychedelics at the same time?
Not really. Just people warning against it, saying no, don't mix so much. That's going to get messy. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big believer in that. I'm a believer in, to some degree, like, okay, LSD and cactus is really good. All right, intramuscular DMT and intramuscular ketamine is amazing, but honestly, it's like, it's a little bit esoteric, and I don't really want to go there so much,
Hi Julian, my name is Susie. I just wanted to find out, did you ever consider putting that all together, take out, that you've got the credits after each bit, and make it into like a documentary, just a film, as opposed to the 5 parts?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like, I wanted to screen it that way tonight, but we're just like ironing it out. I mean, I'm still just figuring out whether we want to release it in 5 parts. Tim thinks 5 parts. I think just one whole section. We haven't quite come to
Literally a conversation we were having a few hours ago. And I said, it's too late for tonight, Julian. But we made, like, that stage it was going to be like 10 parts. I mean,
it was 5 hours at some point. It got really cut,
It now is a length where it could be 2 parts, but it's interesting. In some ways, this is a test screening. We could consider the 5. There's been 4 screenings around Australia this month. So
if you were going to keep going, then obviously it wouldn't work. But the way it sits now, I think it would perfectly make like a documentary film if you just used it the way it was.
Oh yeah, for sure.
thanks for that feedback. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, yeah, the back. Yeah, I think that the 5 discrete kind of chapters work quite well, but if we were to take out the credits and do that, we probably, I did suggest that for the screenings, and Julian was like, no, and then changed his mind after a few screenings, and you're like, oh, maybe we should. But we never know.
Tim reckons 2 hours is too long, but I'm tuning into the pulse of the audiences, and you feel sometimes people's attentions wane, but then it comes back online. And I don't like TikTok, but I've always had a short attention span, and so I know how to do things for the TikTok generation.
First off, that movie was incredible. Well done. And just to answer that question over there about the mix of psychedelics, my personal recommendation is mushrooms and DMT. If you really want to teleport, that's the mix.
I'll take that as a statement. It's just going back to that. I think there's also opportunities for releasing like small parts of like sequences, individual journeys. That's an idea we've also talked about for YouTube and stuff like that. So
that video of the guy tripping in public and the LSD with the cops that come, that would be that has a lot of viral potential for YouTube.
I know, it's amazing.
We thought about that.
Switch exorcism.
There are some scenes where I'm like, that would be an awesome thumbnail. That's the we can have a chat now.
Yeah, you get your social media genius. All right, another one up there.
Hey guys, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's really, I'm really grateful to have you guys teaching and to learn. My question, I was related to lots in the movie, but one particular statement that one of the ladies was making about, I've explored a lot of, substances and psychedelics, both for exploration and then for the recent part of my life more for healing and spirituality. But I go into those spaces and then I struggle to bring it back into a meaningful place that it actually lasts in my life in terms of integration. And I wondered if you had any advice into how to have lasting impact rather than just being you're at a high vibration for a bit and then a few weeks later you're back to where you were.
How often are you ingesting?
Or for the last year, maybe it wouldn't. I know I've done like ayahuasca once recently, and then mushrooms half a dozen times maybe.
So, I mean, it really just depends. I don't know if you really need to integrate it into your regular life. You know, Kalindi would say, no, you can't integrate it. Don't even try. Just let it go. You know, you just let it be what it is. You don't need to integrate it. So I think there's something to that perspective. And I think that if you just, you know, have a somewhat regular practice, like monthly, there comes a time when perhaps the integration might become overwhelming. You know, there is a thing called HPPD, which is hallucinogen persistent, what is it? What's the next bit?
Perception.
Yeah, so where you actually, you stay in the state, you know. And I think like if you're taking psychedelics once a month, I think it can be the case when you're like, all right, too much, all right, that's enough already. You know, I think you get to a point where you're like the integration and the work of it and the realizations and the consciousness begins to come into your regular life, and you're like, you might actually feel a lot more awkward about it and more uneasy about it than you might think that you would be. Because I think there's something to be said just for a very limited state that we have. You know, back in the 60s, the people were really into LSD, they'd be always trying to trip all the time. It's not a sustainable path. Like, to live your life in a limited, often very mundane human world, sometimes you've got to have your blinkers on and just, you know, talk to your accountant and, you know, clean your fridge and do all this boring shit.
I'm not sure if I took the question slightly differently. It's like, how do you integrate those great realizations or visions or, you know, understandings and insights? And I mean, I can speak for myself and perhaps other people who use art. It's a major way which I've always felt is profound. If you can bring back a vision, if you can bring back an insight and share it with other people, it somehow makes it tangible in a whole new way. It's a bit like something that Kane said in his talk after the vision of Enki, and he was saying, you know, even by speaking these stories, which is what this is all about, it makes it real in an interesting way, and again, you get new insights. Just like every time we screen this with new people, you almost see it through their eyes in a different way, and I think that's all part of the beauty of communication and sharing, and that's art. But you know, if it's writing it down, if it's making YouTube videos, if it's creating incredible stories or visions like Bo, then that's a really beautiful way of bringing it into your life and making it an anchor that you can always, like a totem, that you can meditate upon, you know.
And if you struggle to meditate, I can highly recommend flow states activities, drumming, juggling, twirling. I can't sit still most of the time unless I'm on some of these medicines, but I'll fire twirl, or I'll drum, or I'll go for long walks by myself in the bush. And it took me many years of using these compounds and then realizing that I needed longer breaks between them and doing other activities, some mundane, like seeing the accountant and things like that, and other things far less mundane, going out and speaking and dancing for trees and things. But yeah, I find flow states, different ones for different people, really good. So maybe look into that.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
One last question. I think we've got time for here.
We've got about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Oh yeah, good to Julian. It's terrific. I loved it. And, you know, I've been waiting for years for this, and here it is. It's emerged. I found it like a little bit ambitious because all these substances that people take, ayahuasca and 5-MeO, and to me they're very different. Like they'll have a particular character, and their own idiosyncrasies. So, we've had the Eye Awakening scene, and perhaps it's time for like just to focus on particular substances like Hamilton Morris does. But yeah, it was great. It was a great overview. And there's some interesting thing about flow states and using traditional techniques in conjunction with psychedelics, which is my interest. So yeah, I'd like to see yoga, for example. I've had a lot of wonderful results from combining psychedelics with Kundalini yoga and things like that. So to me, people have these various experiences, and Mike Rigby has his vision of Ganesha. That's great, but it's all a little bit aleatory. It's all a bit you know what I mean. Stochastic. It's like, there's this and this and this. What does it add to? Where's the final vision? Is there like a cohesive theme running through everything? That sort of thing. I would like to see someone who's done yoga and combined psychedelics.
That was pretty much what James Skalkos was talking about. Like in his body movement therapy, and I thought that was really beautiful.
It was.
The way he articulated that the way we tried to structure it was like, initiations is like when people are just trying to understand the very first, like mind-blowing moment, but then it gets darker when you have a complication, a bad trip, and then it takes time for people to get their orientations and really try to get their head around all these ways to actually navigate that space, right? And that's where we put a lot of that advice. It's like, setting, this is hopefully that could be a really, really useful document for anyone who is, hopefully to navigate away from the complications. But the visitations was like where it gets really, really out there. That's way beyond, hopefully we've learned to navigate a bit before you start to meet entities, and then evolutions at the end. So there was an attempt to really try to give it some art, but it is a very psychedelic, anarchic, multi-dimensional subject. And that's why you should see the 10-hour cut. Julian keeps threatening to release it. I'm going to drop it.
People want it, Tim, but they want the podcast. They want it.
It's a lot of talking heads, I'll tell you what. There's a lot of talking. That's all it is, actually. 10 hours.
Nothing wrong with talking.
But podcast. I'm suggesting it should be a podcast. Look, there's a lot. There's actually 100 hours of talking, so it's, release them all. Release the house.
Tim's like, off with their heads, off with the talking heads.
I had to be very, it was my job, right? To try and make it more.
Tim said, when I met him in the bar in August 2020, you're going to kill your darlings. He killed so many of my darlings.
It was a big debate. It was hard. There's so many fascinating people, and you were one of them. Really interesting, and it was really difficult to try to actually get to the crux of what needed to be said sometimes. And honestly, I do think Julian should release a lot longer edits. I've just suggested that you should do it as a podcast because it's really hard to watch 10 hours of people talking. Although that's a lot of your videos are actually you talking.
Tom's
stuff.
compadre.
In bits,
Tom's compadre Psych Substance has hour-long videos where he's just talking about DMT, and it's got 10 million views or something crazy. I think if the subject matter is interesting, people are interested. That's what I think.
What do you think, Tom? What do you think?
It's a combination of both. I think number one, it's storytelling, connecting with an audience is absolutely number one. But on top of that, if you can put some engaging visuals, and especially for our ADHD generation, then it's not going to hurt your chances.
I think it's just about eye candy. Although sometimes it is just trying. I think what fascinates me about the visual language of psychedelics, it's the hallucinations, is that it's actually there's a vocabulary sometimes there, and whilst we're being shown this this kaleidoscopic symmetrical dimension, we're simultaneously being there's a narration going on in our heads, our own narration, as other people say, or it's another person's narration, and so in some ways what we're trying to do is simulate that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it kind of makes that intangible tangible, and you're kind of connecting to that state that you're like, oh yeah, I kind of feel like I've seen it before.
It's a really tricky thing though, because my more cartoonish stuff. Look, personally, I've never had an experience that is like a cartoon, but apparently, some people might. I've had more experiences that are very, very abstract, kind of non three-dimensional, Euclidean spaces, and it's really, to try to put that into a visual medium is really challenging. So, but when someone says, "I saw Ganesh," what else are you going to do when the animator takes it on? And there were a couple of animations. There was one that we didn't actually use at all, and it was just so literal that it was a joke. It was just like, this guy's never tripped.
It was so bad,
Like,
and he ripped me
Clearly
off.
had no idea what was it.
He ripped me off later and stole $1,000 from my Upwork account.
So it's an interesting thing. It's like, that's why I said to Julian, how do you vet these guys? Is this guy, has he ever tripped before? Like, does he know anything? Because it was just that's not what it looks like.
It was a waste of money, that one.
Anyway, it's a challenging thing. I don't know. I don't think we've necessarily succeeded. I think it's an impossible task actually, because it really is that so beyond linguistic visual dimensions. But we can only try, right?
Yeah. This is a sketch, and I'm sure over time people will create more. There'll be a much deeper, wider investigation from others, but that's all we have time for, folks. Thanks everyone for coming and sharing.
Hey, we've arranged to have, if anyone wants to keep the conversation going, we've just arranged a bit of a space at Storyville, which is a couple of blocks away. Quite a fun little mushroom-themed bar. So come and join us for a drink or two, and let's try to deconstruct the psychedelic experience a little bit more. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.